They called him Instructor Kevin Salas, but no one ever said it without a mix of awe and confusion. He wasn't the strongest, nor the oldest, nor the most decorated. Yet he'd seen something the others hadn't. Something that made his tone sharper than any blade, his posture stiff as a war banner before the storm, and his eyes always distant, like they were still watching something that hadn't stopped playing. Kevin stood alone at the front of Lecture Dome Theta 9, one of the orbital classrooms hovering just above the Coalition's Central Military Academy on Daler Prime. Through the transparent dome overhead, cadets could see the soft burn of Daler's triple moons, the curved edge of the planetary shield below, and beyond that, space. That view was meant to inspire, but today it felt like the stars were holding their breath. "Everyone here speaks as though they understand war," Kevin said, voice smooth, deliberate. "But none of you do." There were over 300 cadets in the amphitheater. Zarnathi with their twitching eyelids and sonic focus organs, Kthari whose crystalline bones glowed under stress, and a smattering of sentient AIs sitting in hardened interface pods. They were elite, chosen across dozens of systems, trained in theoretical warfare, simulations, and interspecies tactics. All of them eager, arrogant. Only one human sat among them. Her name was Lieutenant Renavas, 22 standard years. Short black hair buzzed close to her scalp, face sharp and unreadable. She didn't look like much beside the towering alien cadets, but no one ever doubted her ability. Not after she beat 2 Kthari in neural reflex drills without even blinking. She had the kind of quiet confidence that worried people. She also had no idea what was coming. "This isn't a history lesson," Kevin continued. "It's a reckoning." He gestured, and the lights dimmed. The central holoscreen bloomed to life with eerie silence. "Today's content is classified Tier Omega. If any of you wish to avoid psychological instability, there is the door." No one moved. A flicker of something, regret, crossed Kevin's face. The footage began. It wasn't pristine. Some of it was corrupted, grainy, jittering with age. But that only made it worse. As the cadets leaned forward, what they saw wasn't strategy or elegant orbital strikes. It was chaos. A helmet cam, shaking, screaming. Human soldiers, young, bleeding, charging into collapsing cities, flame and debris falling like apocalyptic snow. Earth names scrolled in the corners. Fall of London Arcology, Siberian Front, Biosef Strike, New Brasilia Last Stand. Each name a tombstone. The footage cut to orbital views, small, outdated human warships diving into fleets 3 times their size. Suicide runs. No shields. No escape. And yet they kept coming. They were retreating, whispered a Zarnathi cadet, his luminous fingers twitching. "No," Rena said quietly. They weren't. The scenes shifted again. A ruined desert. A lone soldier dragging a wounded comrade through glass sand. A shaky voice over comms repeating, "We hold. We hold. We hold." Until it didn't. Then came the infamous moments. A trench of burning sky in the Pacific Theater. Humans detonating their own carriers rather than let the Vrax consume their data cores. Underground cities where mothers handed children to soldiers and whispered something soft before vanishing behind blast doors. And one fragment, never confirmed, of a human commander laughing hysterically before initiating a black hole bomb protocol. Halfway through the footage, something shifted in the room. The Kthari stopped glowing. The AI pods dimmed their display lights. One Vresh cadet clicked off their neural uplink and vomited from their respiratory slit. A silence unlike anything in the galaxy settled in. Rena didn't flinch, but her jaw tightened. Kevin didn't pause the footage. He let it run, because the most important part was still coming. Near the end, a final segment appeared. It was an aerial drone shot. A valley. Thousands of humans. No ships. No mechs. Just them, on foot, marching toward a fleet of approaching enemy walkers. They sang. It wasn't a chant or a war cry. It was a song. Something old. Folk-like. The translation was sketchy, but the meaning was clear. We are dust, and we stand. We are broken, and we march. They were smiling. When the footage finally ended, Silence stretched long enough to become unbearable. One cadet, a karate whose species had never lost a war in 10,000 years, stood up and walked out without a word. A second followed, then a third, some trembling, some silent, others whispering things like they chose that or that wasn't strategy. That was madness. Kevin turned to the class. Now you understand. But one cadet began. They lost. Humanity fell. Did they? Kevin asked, not with sarcasm, but honest uncertainty. The cadets looked at each other, then at Rena. She hadn't moved. Someone finally asked, is it true the Coalition covered up how many ships it cost to break Earth? Another added, they said Earth's resistance lasted months. That footage, it lasted 18 years, Kevin said quietly. 18 years after the orbital defense grid fell. No formal government, no command structure, just scattered cells, civilians, miners, children. They used rocks when the bullets ran out, and they still never surrendered. A fourth cadet stood, hesitated, then left. Rena's voice broke the quiet. Why show us this now? Kevin met her eyes. Because you're all preparing to fight in the outer sectors, and something stirs out there, something that makes even Earth's horrors look tame. If you don't understand the mind that fights like that, you won't survive. Another pause. Then Rena asked, softly, where did the footage come from? Kevin didn't answer immediately. Then he turned toward the central control panel and entered a command. The screen lit again, one last feed. Classified code burned across it. Source, unknown/found drifting outside Barnard star/encrypted human signal/year recovered. 3177 Galactic Standard. Alone escape pod. Inside a skeleton. Human. Clutching an ancient, cracked data drive. It was labeled, so they remember. Before anyone could speak, the alarms went off. Red lights. Flashing glyphs. Emergency protocols flooding the dome. Kevin stepped away from the podium, jaw tight. Secure your gear. No questions. Not now. Is this a drill? Someone asked. No, he said grimly. It's the real thing. One of the outer colonies just went dark. Rena stood slowly, eyes still on the screen. Not the red lights. Not the warnings. But that pod. That skeleton. That message. Something cold and electric slid down her spine. She whispered to herself, barely audible. What did we wake up? They marched into the combat history archive 2 by 2, sleek metallic doors whispering shut behind them. The room resembled a hybrid between a museum and a war bunker. Hexagonal walls pulsed softly with interface lights. Hollow displays hovered midair, and sound cushion fields dampened any unnecessary noise. Elias walked between rows of floating seats designed for multiple body types, from serpentine morphologies to quadrupeds and avian talon claws. He sat in the back, a familiar position, not from fear, but because he wanted to watch them, every twitch, every gasp. Commander Resigned, a Vakhtari officer whose head resembled a molten obsidian wedge, floated to the central podium. Cadets, welcome to Cross-Species Tactical Insight Module 6. Today, we examine how species evolve under pressure. Resigned gestured, and the room dimmed to a deep blue. We will begin with the history of warfare on Earth. Humanity. A few chuckles bounced around. Elias didn't react. He'd heard those laughs before, dismissive, amused, alien minds assuming small stature equals small history. It wouldn't last. Resigned continued. Due to the violent nature of the following footage, you are advised to disengage secondary sympathetic neural channels. The footage is unfiltered and original. The first segment began. Primitive humans in animal hides clashed with flint spears beneath a red sun. The display faded into armored knights charging across muddy fields, screaming in languages long dead. Gunpowder thundered. Aerial dogfights crisscrossed black and white skies. And then, the modern wars. A human tank brigade smashed through desert defenses, explosions blooming like metal flowers. The footage rolled into trench warfare, napalm storms, drone swarms, orbital strikes, all accompanied by uncut sound, screams, orders, panic. No music, no commentary, just raw history. The air shifted. The smirks died first. Then came the stillness. Elias watched a Kraith cadet, an insectoid with 6 crystalline eyes, slowly lower their upper arms, eyes twitching as a flamethrower swept across jungle brush. He recognized that clip. Vietnam, 1967. Another cadet, a Ralphisk with scaled, leaf-like fins protruding from their skull, made a soft, keening noise when the footage shifted to the D-Day landings. The sheer number of humans charging into machine gun fire, wave after wave, stunned them. The footage paused. Red Han spoke evenly. This segment covered approximately 4,000 years of human conflict, from tribal to intercontinental warfare. No one responded. Rethan's voice grew almost respectful. They're unique, statistically anomalous. Their species did not experience the long peace phases common in most civilizations. They do not go to war out of necessity. They go to war despite every reason not to. Someone coughed. A single cadet, tall, green-skinned, with gemstone-colored teeth, stood. Why? This savagery. This unending bloodshed. They fought even when they didn't need to. Elias finally spoke. Because for us, peace was always rented, never owned. They turned to look at him, and for a moment, his words hovered like ash in the room. Then the next module began. No longer static clips. This was something more intimate. Helmet cam footage. A human Marine, pinned under rubble, singing to himself as enemy fire rained overhead. Another clip showed a soldier dragging 2 wounded comrades through a kill zone, despite being gut-shot himself. He didn't stop, even when his blood pooled beneath him. The Vakhtari cadet closest to Elias whispered, "He should have retreated." Elias murmured, "He was a retreat." The next video changed everything. Operation Starfall, year 2179. A joint Earth Federation strike against the rogue Sithar sovereignty. No other species had volunteered. It was considered suicidal. The footage opened on a black starfield, lit by sudden flashes of plasma fire. Human destroyers broke formation, diving straight into the enemy fleet in tight spirals. No coordination, no caution. Just velocity, violence, and fury. A human voice crackled through comms. "If we die today, we make the bastard remember who killed him." An enemy cruiser detonated in a blaze of white light. The footage jumped to ground combat. Smoke, blood, chaos. One human soldier took 12 rounds to the chest, dropped, got back up, and kept fighting with one arm. "Med stims," someone whispered. "No," Elias replied. "Will." Another cadet, a small, flightless avian species, tilted its head. But why didn't they retreat? They were outnumbered, statistically doomed. Red Han answered this time. Because surrender is not a universal instinct. Humanity does not fear death the way we do. Not in battle. A silence settled, thick as iron. Then it cracked. The first resignation came from the Serati twins, liquid-bodied soldiers whose people specialized in reconnaissance. One slithered forward and dropped their badge. "I cannot fight something that does not fear death." Others followed. A tall insectoid cadet, then a blue-furred warrior cast from drawn car. Dozens stood, one by one. The Vakhtari next to Elias remained seated. Barely. His mandibles twitched. "Is this how you think? All of you?" Elias didn't look at him. "Not all. Some of us are scared. Some of us want to run. But when the line breaks, someone stands. That's always a human. Not because we're brave, but because if we don't, no one else will." The Vakhtari turned back toward the screen. The next footage was cued. Red Han paused. "The next segment contains no combat. It is aftermath. You may leave." No one moved. The screen shifted. A human field hospital. Rows of wounded. A medic holding a child's hand. Another feeding water to a dying soldier. One clip showed a human soldier carrying an enemy to safety. An enemy. The same man who later died from a sniper round to the back of his head. The room was quiet now. Not silent, reverent. One cadet stood, not to resign, but to salute. Elias blinked. That had never happened before. Red Han turned to Elias. "You understand now why we bring you to these sessions." Elias exhaled. "To scare them." No, Rethan's eyes glinted. "To teach them what fear really is." The screen flickered again. Final segment. A single image. A human graveyard on a distant moon. The markers were simple, metal, weather-worn, but each had a name. And beneath one inscription, they died with their boots on, and the stars wept. The Vakhtari beside Elias whispered, I thought your kind only fought. Elias stood. We do. And then we remember. And then we fight again. Redhan looked around the room. Dismissed. All of you. Those who wished to withdraw from active combat. Stepped forward. Almost half the room moved. And Elias knew. They hadn't even shown the worst of it yet. 2 days passed. The archive chamber remained closed, sterile and silent like a sealed tomb. The footage had rippled through the Intergalactic Academy like a psychic scream. Cadets spoke in hushed tones. Some couldn't sleep. Others hadn't returned from their personal chambers. And Elias? He was summoned to the Strategic Oversight Wing, Level 9, high above the cadet halls, where the walls were made of obsidian and silence. He walked in calmly. His uniform was pressed, dark and crisp, a rare event. But he wasn't here to impress. He was here because they needed a human to explain the unexplainable. Inside, 3 figures sat behind a curved, semi-transparent desk. Admiral Vael, the amphibian strategist from Sephir Prime. Commandant Res, bristling with fur, tusks, and the air of someone who'd killed planets. And finally Zal. Zal was not military. Zal was a Xenthari diplomat, six-limbed and soft-spoken, whose people had never fought a single war in 10,000 years of existence. He was also terrified. Vael was the first to speak. Cadet Elias, you were present at the CHAM screening. Yes, sir. Did you know, Vael said, that 63 cadets resigned their commissions that night? I did. And that 8 others filed for cultural deferment? 2 were hospitalized for psychological stress. 1 tried to cut off their own battle tendrils. I heard. Zal's voice entered the room like cold mist. Why do your people record such horrors? Elias turned to him, tone quiet but firm. Because we need to remember. We need to remind ourselves of the cost, of who we are and who we were. But why show others? Zal pressed. Why infect them with it? Elias blinked slowly. Because you asked to fight beside us. And no one fights beside humans without knowing what that means. Commandant Res leaned forward. We think it's time you knew the truth. Elias frowned. The truth. Vael gestured. A new hollow display shimmered to life above the table. It wasn't Earth. It was Xenar Theta, a small, backwater moon orbiting a dead planet in the Tarsus Fringe. Elias had never heard of it, but what unfolded on the display made his blood run cold. It was war. Again. Only this time, the footage was live. Federation forces, multi-species, trapped in a siege. 12 days. Supplies dwindling. Enemy forces outnumbered them 10-1. Plasma storms prevented orbital reinforcement. And then a red beacon flickered in the upper corner. Human detachment inbound. Zal spoke softly. We didn't request them. They volunteered. Elias leaned in, his heart thumping. The footage shifted. It was night on Xenar Theta. Torrential acid rain fell like molten beads. Enemy mech crawled like steel locusts across a field of shattered bones. And then, a thunderous roar. A dropship cut through the storm like a bullet from a god's gun. No lights. No warning. Just fury. The humans had arrived. They hit the ground running. No fancy gear. No powered exosuits. Just old-world grit, heavy weapons, and storm-blackened faces. They advanced under fire, dragging wounded allies back. They lit the sky with fire and smoke, carving a path through hopeless odds. One soldier took a plasma bolt to the shoulder and laughed. Laughed. He turned and tackled the enemy operator straight into a pit. Another charged a mech with nothing but a magnetic mind and pure rage. It was suicide, and yet they won. They won. Elias felt it. Not pride, not surprise. Recognition. This was what humans did. Vael leaned back. We intercepted an enemy transmission 2 hours ago. You should hear it. The audio played, translated from guttural clicks and grinding tones. The Terrans are not like the others. They do not measure odds. They do not weigh life as we do. They do not stop. They come in fire and shadow, and they die like gods screaming. Tell the War Council, we cannot win. Not against them. Not against the mad ones. Silence fell. Zal spoke again. This is the truth, Elias. Your people's greatest weapon is not your technology. It is your willingness to burn with the enemy, to become the thing that scares monsters. Elias didn't deny it. Then why, Res growled, does the Federation keep you in reserve? Why limit your deployment? Elias gave a small, haunted smile. Because once humans go in, we don't always come back the same. He looked up at them. You think the galaxy is afraid of us now? Show them what happens when we stop holding back. Veer stared long and hard, then tapped a symbol on his interface. A star lit up on the holomap. Earth. Then prepare yourself, Cadet Elias. Because the Council has voted. He stood straighter. For what? Zal answered, tone solemn. For full-spectrum human mobilization. Elias said nothing, but deep down, something ancient stirred, and it whispered. Finally, the order was sent, not as a blast across the stars, but as a whisper, a low murmur encoded in black channel frequencies, layered beneath the galactic trade reports and diplomatic chatter. The kind of message you didn't see unless you were meant to. The kind of message only they responded to. Humanity's war code. Omega Directive. All veteran strata mobilize. And like that, the wolves of Earth stirred from their quiet corners. Retired soldiers with prosthetic limbs blinked as their neurochips lit up for the first time in decades. Mercenaries on deep-sea rigs dropped, welding torches mid-sentence. Colonists with worn-out rifles stared into the skies as alerts flashed crimson on HUDs that hadn't activated since the Singularity War. On Europa's mining ring, a woman named Sergeant Vega, who once took down a war beast with a crowbar, muttered about damn time. They didn't ask why. They didn't ask how. Because they all remembered. They remembered the day the Federation had welcomed them in with a handshake and hopeful eyes, only to keep them at arm's length. Feared, controlled, deployed sparingly, like weapons that might explode if used too often. But now the leash was off, and humanity had remembered who they were. The Federation Council scrambled to contain it. Meetings burned through the night. Ambassadors wept into their holograms. Civilian populations on dozens of worlds panicked as rumors spread like plasma fire. Because it wasn't just humans being sent to the front. It was unfiltered humans. The first wave hit Tarsus Sigma, a planet under siege for 9 weeks by the Ikra swarm, a hive mind collective that consumed both biomass and technology in perfect, endless appetite. Federation efforts had stalled. The skies were black with smoke. Resistance was dwindling. Then they arrived. No flags. No anthem. Just dropships. 1,000 of them. They didn't land in secure zones or wait for intel. They struck the heart. Straight into the swarm's birthing pits. Every other species called that suicide. Humans called it flanking. Footage streamed live. An Ikra megabeast, 3 stories tall, charged a human tank line. A man in blood-slick armor climbed onto its back with a thermal blade, carved a hole in its chitin, and dropped a grenade inside. When it exploded, he stood, soaked in acidic ichor, and roared at the next one. He wasn't special. He was just one of them. Elias watched it unfold on the feed from his bunk back at the academy. He should have been on the front by now, but the council had ordered him to remain. A symbol, they said, a representative, the human cadet who sparked the reckoning. He felt useless, trapped, until the knock came. It wasn't a door knock, not the polite kind. It was the kind that meant emergency. Cadet Elias, said a voice through the wall intercom. You are ordered to report to Launch Bay for immediately. Deployment has been authorized. Shuttle Nightwind is waiting. His heart surged. No more watching. It was time. The shuttle cut through void like a knife of obsidian. He wasn't alone. Inside were 30 other soldiers. Not cadets, killers. Grizzled, tattooed, augmented. No one smiled. No one needed to. Their presence spoke volumes. As they neared the drop point, the commander, a woman with a scar running across her throat, spoke without turning. First time, Elias nodded. She looked over her shoulder, her eyes dark and burning. Don't die clean, rookie. They dropped in a fire. No ceremony. No comms check. Just impact and chaos. They hit the surface of Karza 9, a volcanic world choked in sulfur and smoke, where a rebel machine intelligence had converted an entire mountain range into a mobile death factory. The Federation had lost 3 battalions trying to breach the outer ring. Humans lost 0 time. The moment boots hit ground, the team fanned out. No hesitation. Elias followed, his rifle humming with energy. He saw it all up close, what the Academy simulations couldn't show. The madness, the will, how humans didn't fight around fear. They used it. He saw a man leap into a collapsing tunnel to hold up the beam with raw strength while others escaped. He saw 2 others laughing, as a machine war spider tore into their shields. And Elias ran toward it. Without thinking, he sprinted across the scorched field, tossed a mine, slid under the machine's legs, and detonated it mid-lunge. It collapsed in a screech of sparks. The smoke cleared, and Elias stood, his armor cracked, his arms trembling. He was alive. The commander looked at him. Blood splattered across her helmet. "You're one of us now." Back at the Intergalactic Academy, chaos unfolded in another form. Zal stood before the assembled cadet council, his usual calm demeanor gone, replaced with sheer existential panic. "They're not like us," he said, pacing. "They aren't just soldiers. They're the embodiment of resistance. You don't teach that. You survive it." A young cadet from the peaceful giant species raised her voice. "But they're winning, aren't they?" Zal stopped. "Yes, that's the problem." Across the galaxy, more footage poured in. Humans using asteroids as kinetic bombs. Sniper duos taking down city-sized war engines. A fleet of outdated Earth vessels appearing behind enemy lines without warp drives, using century-old stealth tech no one knew still worked. They were rewriting the rules. And suddenly, the rest of the galaxy realized they were no longer the apex. Something primal had awakened. Something feral. When Elias returned from Karza 9, his armor was scorched. One eye was bruised shut. His knuckles raw. He was silent, but changed. He walked through the Academy's grand hall as silence fell around him. Aliens from 100 species turned and stared. Not in mockery, not in curiosity, but in respect. The Commandant herself awaited him. "You disobeyed orders. I improvised. You risked a 1 billion credit strike operation. I ended the war engine." A pause, then a nod. "Congratulations, cadet. You're promoted to field lieutenant. Effective immediately." He didn't smile. He saluted. Meanwhile, on a distant world, deep in uncharted space, a dark council convened. Not Federation, not Rebel. Something older, something forgotten. And one voice rasped, "The Terrans are rising. Their fire spreads." Another hissed, "We buried them once. Buried them in myths. They're not myths anymore," came the final whisper. "They are coming." Outside, an ancient world stirred. And in the sky, the stars burned just a little brighter. The war fronts fell silent, not in surrender, but in stunned observation. Across Federation territory, dozens of battlefields became graveyards of the enemy and showcases of something far more dangerous: the return of unchained humanity. Where once officers pleaded for reinforcements, now came only 2 words stamped in tactical summaries: humans deployed. And wherever that was written, the next report was always the same: conflict terminated, collateral, minimal, morale shift, galactic. Elias stood at the edge of Scorched Cliff on Vornax Delta, watching the black sun rise through crimson smoke. Behind him lay the shattered remains of a WRM tank Leviathan, still hissing as molten gears cooled. His squad was gone, scattered, redeployed, or buried. He was the last on site. He wasn't alone for long. A shuttle hissed down behind him. Not human. Federation standard, sleek and silver. From it descended Commandant Nisera, her robes fluttering in wind that smelled like ash and ozone. Beside her was Zal, his scales dulled with guilt, his eyes low. She didn't waste time. "Lieutenant Elias, you've been summoned." He turned, face expressionless. "Another front?" Nisera, shook her head. No, the council. You're not being sent to fight. You're being asked to explain. In the Grand Council Hall, they gathered. Over 400 representatives, species from every corner of the galaxy. The hall felt more like a cathedral than a courtroom. Vast, echoing, sacred in its weight. They didn't bring Elias in chains. They brought him in armor. Scorched, real, unvarnished. A living reminder. Nisra stepped forward to address the council. There is no denying it. Humanity's veterans have changed the course of 3 wars in under 6 weeks. They've stabilized 2 fractured regions. Their tactics, while brutal, have resulted in fewer civilian deaths than any other force. Murmurs rippled, some astonished, others uneasy. Zal stood beside her. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper. Understanding. I misjudged them, he said, looking across the chamber. I saw only savagery. I thought they were beasts needing chains. I forgot what they chose not to be. Eyes turned to Elias. He was offered the floor. He stepped forward slowly. No speech prepared. No flourish. Just words, raw and steady. You watched our old wars to mock us, he said quietly. To feel better about how far you'd come. We knew that. But we let you. Because humans aren't interested in reputation. We're interested in survival. You let that settle. Every war you think you understand, you watched edited footage. You didn't see what happened when the cameras cut out. What broke inside the people who lived. The price they paid just to wake up the next day. That's why we're feared. Not because we fight, but because we remember. And we keep going anyway. Silence. Not the uncomfortable kind. The reverent kind. Later, in private chambers, Nisra approached Elias. The council wants to issue new protocols. Integrated human leadership roles. War doctrine revisions. Even reparations for past containment efforts. He gave a tired smile. That's not my department. No, she said. But it's your influence. You didn't just win battles. You changed how we think of war. Of ourselves. He sat down exhausted. All I wanted was a fair chance. To be seen. Not as a monster. Not as a tool. Just as a person who refuses to let the darkness win. She looked at him. You did more than that. You reminded us why the darkness fears the light. Back at the Intergalactic Academy, change was visible in everything. The Cadet Council was dissolved, rebuilt with human representation. Mandatory simulations were revised to include Earth war history, not as horror, but as study. Strategy courses now included soul conflict maneuvers. Psychological lectures touched on the human concept of stubborn hope. And in the courtyard where it had all begun, where Elias once stood alone beneath mocking alien eyes, there now stood a statue. It wasn't of him. It was of a human soldier. Genderless, ageless, half of their body in ruins, half still standing tall. One hand holding a rifle, the other holding a child. Below it read, "They burned, but never broke." In honor of those who carried the flame. Across the galaxy, things shifted. Recruitment drops occurred. Not because of fear, but reflection. Entire species reconsidered their philosophies on peace, war, and preparedness. Some resigned from military life. Others joined for the first time, not to fight, but to understand. Human instructors were now present on every major battle doctrine council. War ethics boards expanded to include human philosophers, historians, and even veterans who had once been condemned. The very same people who were once contained were now guiding an empire. Elias didn't stay at the academy. He requested reassignment to Earth, to walk its cities again, visit the old war memorials, speak to the veterans who'd never wanted medals, only remembrance. He spent days in silence and nights listening to old war songs sung by scarred souls around fire pits on Mars. One day, a young alien cadet from the Grolly species found him at an old human archive. "Sir," the cadet said nervously, "why do humans always win?" Elias didn't answer right away. He looked up at a mural. It was a painting, crude but powerful, of Earth. A Bluda surrounded by storm and void, with a single phrase etched below. Home is not a place. It's a reason. He looked at the cadet and said, "We don't always win. We just never accept that we've lost." In a dark corner of the galaxy, far from the lights of war and diplomacy, An ancient species watched the transformation. The ones who once tried to bury Earth. The ones who failed. They remember who they are, the seer whispered. They remember the fire, said another. And in the distance, on 1,000 fractured worlds, the word spread. The Terrans were back. And this time, they weren't alone. Years passed, not in silence, but in shift. The galaxy was no longer the same after Earth's truths were unveiled. It didn't collapse into chaos as some feared, nor did it unify overnight. What followed was something more unpredictable, a reckoning of identity. The human war archives were no longer classified. They became a central galactic study resource, their brutal honesty piercing through layers of sanitized history. Not just footage now, but journals, interviews, raw footage from helmet cams, the full spectrum of the human war experience. For the first time, the galaxy saw what war felt like to a human. The sound of a mother whispering into her child's ear as missiles screamed above. The heavy breath of a lone soldier crawling through fire just to press a single button. The silence of a room after a hard-fought victory. No cheering, only tears for the ones who didn't make it. The archives weren't a glorification. They were a mirror, and that mirror shattered the illusions of 1,000 species. On Keltra, the Vexari people once raised their young to believe peace was the result of bloodlessness. That war was evil in all forms. After the broadcast of the siege of Matra Prime, where human medics shielded alien infants while dying in droves, the Vexari High Conclave rewrote its military doctrine. Peace without sacrifice is not peace. It is illusion. We choose to remember. Half their training now focused not on how to win, but why to fight at all. On Rixtha, a species known for abandoning the weak in battle, an unexpected movement emerged. Veterans of the Rixthan military, once lauded for tactical ruthlessness, began resigning en masse. They cited Earth soldiers as their turning point. We saw humans carry their wounded for miles, refusing to leave even one behind. And we, who call ourselves proud, left ours to die. We were efficient, but they were honorable. We see that now. Statues of lone Rixthan heroes, once symbols of glory, were replaced with murals showing two warriors standing back to back, one human, one Rixthan, both bleeding, both standing. The galaxy was evolving. A new alliance emerged, the Fire Concord. It wasn't a military pact. It was an oath signed by over 70 species, pledging to adopt Earth's core values in warfare. Never dehumanize your enemy. Protect civilians at all costs. Victory means nothing if your soul doesn't survive with you. Lead with honor. Die with meaning. Never let fear define you. Earth wasn't the leader of the Concord, but it was its heartbeat. And still, the legacy spread in stranger ways. On the distant moon of Iokar, a playwright adapted ancient Terran letters into a performance titled Letters to a Ghost. The alien audience wept at the raw, unfiltered grief of a human widow writing to her fallen partner, letters that never expected a reply. On Zarthan 6, street graffiti in the human slums read, "Don't stop. Not now. Not ever." It became a rallying cry for the downtrodden, the oppressed, the afraid. A phrase whispered before revolutions, murmured before last stands, spoken between lovers going to war. Don't stop. Those two words were now carved into the council's ceremonial blade. The same blade once used to exile Elias and his kind. Now it was used only to knight them. And what of the academy, where this all began? It became more than a military institute. It transformed into the Human-Terran Studies Nexus, a place where every species, regardless of history or hierarchy, could learn the truths of humanity firsthand. Every cadet, regardless of origin, now sat through the same simulation at the end of their training, the Trench of Odessa, a hyper-realistic, 360-degree VR recreation of one of Earth's most hopeless battles. Not to show how humans won, but how they endured. Some cadets dropped out after the simulation. Others re-enlisted, not because they wanted to fight, but because they now understood why one must sometimes choose to. As for Elias, he never sought rank or title. He became a field historian, traveling from system to system, gathering stories not of battles, but of the moments that changed people. The turning points, the silent decisions, the scars that shaped futures. He was last seen near the edge of the Vante Expanse, speaking with a child whose people had never known war. "They say your people are made of fire," the child whispered. Elias knelt, offering the child a worn earth patch from his old uniform. "No," he said, "we're made of hope. The fire is just what we burn when they try to take it away." In the great Galactic Memory Hall, a final exhibit was unveiled. A lone chamber, empty but for one object, a pair of worn combat boots. Beside them, etched in glass, was a message written in Terran Standard and over 600 alien dialects. In every war, there were moments they could have broken. In every moment, they chose not to. This is not a tribute to violence. It is a monument to the ones who walked through hell and kept going. The universe changed because of the day the cadets watched Earth's footage. Not from fear, from understanding. They saw not just a species of war fighters, but a people who refused to be broken. A people who bore every scar, remembered every loss, and stood tall anyway. They didn't ask to be heroes. They didn't want to be legends. But they were. And in time, their legacy outlived even the stars that bore witness. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. Names faded. Faces blurred. But among the stars, a phrase endured. Spoken in defiance. In unity. In unbreakable will. "Human, don't stop.